Hey, good evening, everybody. It's me back again over here on the 11th house side of things, which is really where the Sunday night show uh, emanates from. We had a bit of an issue prior to, well, let's see, right Friday when I was able to figure out how to make sure that we could go back and forth between both channels. So here we are together on the 11th house where Sunday Night AstroLive takes place every Sunday night, a little bit earlier than this, but it's here and so am I, and hopefully so are you. And we have a lot to cover tonight. It's, a lot of times I try to find levity and humor, and even in the kind of the darker or more surreal spaces of our experience. And I know that probably at some point in the next 72 hours, um, I will. I will. I'll I'll find some humor. Find some humor in where we are. But right now, it's not very humorous. Right now, this is a very, in a lot of ways, very sobering time to be alive and to be a part of the human experience. Not just the American experience, although that does enter into the equation, but the human experience. And we're witnessing things that we've never seen before in our lifetime or in any lifetime, really, that we can remember. And it's not something that we haven't been talking about. Okay, we've been talking about this for a while now, and um, on this show, on the 15 Minutes of Flame show, uh, clearly we've been, you know, really doing our best to exhume sort of where things are, where things are going. Okay, and I think we've done a pretty good job of it. It was pretty clear to me that when the young man who was running around the neighborhood in Georgia when he was wrestling for the shotgun and got killed, I could see where the next phase. I'm getting invaded by the cat crew tonight. I've got both a Jasper and Rosie sighting. Jasper, the astrological cat, is in the house. It was pretty clear to see where the next phase was going to go. And there's two reasons why, which I think are pretty, one is clear and the other is a bit more esoteric. So Ole Damagard, who is a pretty interesting character, he has made a kind of a career of tracking down kind of real-time false flags and psychological operations. And one of the things that he's noticed is that when there's an event in a certain place, that there's usually a link to that event and what's coming next. So when the young man in Atlanta was killed while wrestling a shotgun away from a guy who'd been tracking him, and when he was killed, I knew on two levels that this was going to be part of the next evolution phase of where we are, because that's where the CDC is located. The headquarters of the CDC is in Atlanta, Georgia. So we've been dealing with a CDC issue, with the coronavirus. And then we have this event that takes place in Atlanta. So these are the two events that are coming together, right? One event, which we've been experiencing, and then the next event, which we're now experiencing. So I've been talking about this. I'd mentioned on Twitter when the coronavirus was going to tail off and end, that we would have a very different reality that we were going to have to deal with, because it had been played out. Like, they ran the coronavirus as far as they could. The numbers were starting to come back because they knew that was going to happen. The numbers were not going to match up. And what occurred was that the operation or the action had run out of steam. It had run out of steam. It had run out of legitimacy. And not only that, but people were organizing now to enter back into society. They were organizing and they were showing up at state capitals. Governor Whitler had her hands full with people, with just a simple barber, Carl Mankey. You know, we had people showing up in California. California being a state that has been long lost to the liberal left, and now it looks like to the CCP. Even in California, people were starting to organize, and they saw what was being taken away from them. They saw that their ability to move about freely, to speak freely, to actually have a job where they could, you know, as good or bad as the job was, it allowed them to have some form of money, finance, take care of bills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those things have been taken away from them. And so people were finally starting to wake up. They were finally starting to say, I've had enough. We've had enough. We're going to go and we're going to let our voices be heard. We're going to open the barbershop regardless of whatever this governor has to say. We're going to open the gym regardless whatever this governor has to say. So what we began to see the beginning or the movement of a movement, a political movement. And this was taking place. There was traction. And then all of a sudden, guess what happens? Two things happen. The nodes change. And then we have the George Floyd event, which happens in Minneapolis. I'm going to be talking a lot about that tonight. So we went from 0 Cancer to 29 Gemini. And the Sabian symbol for 0 Cancer is on the ocean or at sea, sailors on a ship lower one flag and raise another. So that is a sea change. And that is indicative of what happened when we went from 0 Cancer to 29 Gemini. We went from one scene and one sea change to a completely new scene and another sea change like that. So we're no longer dealing with the Cancerian / Capricornian antipodes, right? We're not dealing with that anymore. We're dealing with Gemini Sagittarius. I'm going to get into a lot of that tonight. And I'm going to break down sort of the you know, because every time these nodes change, you know, there are clear indicators of that astrologically. Before I go any further, let me just check in with you guys in Chatlandia and see where and who is in the house tonight. We got Isla Wren and Fifth Wall. There's Jennifer, Lindsay CG. What's going on? Jones in the house. FUP77, Judy. Hello, Judy. 10 Dragon, Miranda Couch. Sane, hey, Sane. What's happening? Cheryl Luciavo, the purple one. Yeah, we're going to be talking about the purple one tonight. A lot, actually. Laura Smith and Wesson in the house. Annie B. There she is. Mary Greether. Hi, Mary. Zero Hedge Haven. We got Snake Jones. Here we go. Beth Berry. Los Angeles locked down. 6 p.m. curfew. Beverly Hills is a 4 p.m. curfew. I guess they put us back in our homes again, didn't they? Liz Luscious. Here and present. There's my man, Steve Thor Mercer. I don't think we have an Ani sighting tonight. Michael, MC, DJ MC. What's happening? I just watched a guy get mobbed to death. Yeah, we're seeing things we've never seen before. Let's see. Everything where I am is closed. What else we have here? Who else we have? Mona Law, state of emergency in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg. Yep. Joe Dimitri here. There's Ani. Hi, Ani. Good to see you. And let's see. Marie Gibson. Hello, or Gilson. Hi, Marie Gilson. Let's see. Snake Jones says, my wife's hospital is a trauma 1 center. The ER is full of gunshot wounds. That's here in St. Louis. That's interesting. A little bit of St. Louis information tonight. Miranda says, I just saw reposted that guy who worked for Bernie's campaign who said Milwaukee would burn first, then spread. Anyone else remember that? Yes. Let's see. Cheryl says, I've avoided watching news all weekend. The weather was beautiful. to be distracted by all the darkness. They are to make sure that you are going to have your face pressed close against all of the demoralization. Hi, Mona. Where's Emily? She said she'd be here tonight. Today, people, Ani says today, people protesting walking I-95, highway closed or causeways to beaches. Yesterday, protest, rioting in downtown Miami. This is it, helter skelter. What's going on, Darren? Good to see you. EC 2189 Kaku, killer hornets, and paid protesters. Release them all. Jennifer Rubin. Will protesters get corona? No, because there's no such thing as corona. None at all. No such thing as corona. All right, we are in a very serious time, and we're going to try to make heads and tails of where we're at. And again, of course, you know, what can you or we do about it? Because that's really where the rubber hits the road. And you know, this is a time where, again, I'm going to stress some practical solutions. I'm not a fear peddler, but if you are not aware of your circumstances, your surroundings, and your conditions during this time, you are going to be in for a very rude awakening, okay? Very rude awakening. So that's going to be a lot of tonight's show. And so be prepared, strap in. Things are about to get very real, very, very real. All right, let me do the invocation. Dear blessed and holy Father, Mother, God of the great central sun, which is the universal light, the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel. Not only do we ask that the highest and best information come through this video and this transmission for each and every one of us, but the strength and the truth and the clarity and the wisdom to live through this time, which is so very important as we go through a period of tribulation and reckoning. This is the most important thing we can all share with one another and the Most High, strength, wisdom, and truth through this period. And we ask for that. Through this video and through each and every act and participation with one another in our own lives. And that only the highest and best, once again, information and wisdom come through. We also ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, clarified, purified, and removed from this transmission in each and every one of us, so that we may enter back into our own experience sovereign after viewing this. And so be it. All right, let's get rolling. A lot to talk about. A lot to talk about. Things have happened very quickly. 6 days and the world has turned. It is absolutely and utterly turned. The event, of course, that I'm talking about is the, I'm going to call it an event because I'm not sure exactly what happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I do believe that something did happen, but what actually happened is an entirely different story, because as usual, there are anomalies everywhere. And remember now, I'm going to talk and try to keep this inside of an astrological context. We are in a high time of Gemini. We have Gemini sun. We have the true node in Gemini. We have Venus retrograding in Gemini, and we have Mercury in Gemini. It's a lot of Gemini. And when we get an abundance of Gemini, what we have is we have like a hall of mirrors. And Gemini evokes images of simulacra, of twins, right? Because when we think of Gemini, we think of the twins, and the twin theme is going to rear its head tonight in a very powerful way. Gemini also has to deal with polarity, and we are in a polaric situation now. You know, black and white, right? The aggrieved versus the so-called oppressors. We are in a polaric situation between the left and the right. That's another polaric situation. We're involved in a polaric situation between the so-called Democrats and the Republicans. Youth and the non-youth, because if you have been watching any of the footage that's readily available in any of the protests and any of the riots, I mean, let's just call them riots because that's what they are. You can see that there is a very strong undercurrent of youth that are involved. So we're talking millennials, And we're also talking Generation Z, even younger than millennials. So we also have the other groups, or the older group, theoretically, that sees what's happening and is not resonant. So all this polarity is being cranked up. It is, and when you get into polarity, this is where there's a huge amount of energy. You know, this is why the duality and the polarity through Gemini shows up again and again and again. And I've been talking about this for a very long time. And when we see that in action, the reason why it is engaged is because when you have two things that are their polar opposite, right? What do you have between the polar opposition? You have a field. You have a field of energy. If you take a magnet and you turn it around, right, so that they're not together, where there is no polarity, but the charge is polarized. You ever play with those magnets? There is a field between those magnets. That is energy. That is the magnetic field that polarity creates. And so when we have examples, or when we have dynamics of polarity, the magnetic field is established. And that is what is being used and drawn from to actually power the events. Okay, that's what's happening. And there is a ton of it happening right now. Like, we are in deep, deep polarity, and we're going to be going through a series of very powerful eclipses, particularly the one that's going to happen on July 5th. And that's going to happen on the US sun. And during that time, Mars will enter into the sign of Aries. And it will be in the sign of Aries all summer, and will not move on to Taurus until 2021. And during that phase, it will wind up in a T-square with Saturn, with Pluto, with Jupiter, and later on, clearly during the month of Cancer, we'll also square the sun. So we'll be dealing with T-squares with Mars in July. And then Venus, being retrograde, shows up later in August. So we'll have another T-square with Venus that'll take place. And then, of course, we'll have the Mars opposition to Libra in the month of October. And then I've looked at the election chart, and it is, we've talked about it. We've observed the election chart. It is one of the bloodiest charts I've ever seen. And Mars also is, it's heat, it's fire, and we're going to be dealing with it for 6 months. We are in a very deep 6-month ordeal. And as it goes through, Mars goes through Aries, it will be in the 4th house of the United States chart, which is the home. And that has a lot of different meanings. Means that in the cradle of the US chart itself, it'll be there. But also this idea of home, security, your own home might even be threatened during this Mars transit. So I think this is something that everybody needs to pay very close attention to. And again, I'm trying not to establish or stir up any fear, but if we don't talk about this and we keep our heads in the sand, we're not going to be prepared for what's coming. And what's coming could be on either side of that polarity, okay? Either side of that polarity. We'll either be dealing with continued and orchestrated acts of violence, and believe me, they are orchestrated. Or we'll be dealing with the other side of that orchestration of violence, which will be martial law, and we'll have troops on the streets of the United States, right? So we better be prepared, because Mars is going to be very much in the mix for 6 months. Now, I'm also going to bring another level of intensity into the conversation. You need to be prepared for this as well. There's a very good chance during this Mars transit we will enter into a conflict with China, okay? So I'm being just really upfront about it. China has said that they're pulling all of their students out of the American universities. They've also amassed 10,000 troops near the border in Pakistan with India. So if there is strife and conflict here in this country, if you were a country that had any kind of ambitions to attack another country, you would do it when they were at their weakest, when they were fighting their own conflict or their own battle at home. So the other reason why I'm bringing this up is because China is heavily Libran. We've looked at the Chinese chart. I think I've got 3 or 4 planets in Libra. I know the sun is in Libra, Mercury's in Libra, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, even Mars is in Libra. So there's going to be a Mars opposition with China's chart. And we know that China has been a chronometer for these events. Recently, I was asked to write a brief kind of update for a magazine, New Dawn magazine, which is based out of Australia. And I did that today. I sent them a kind of a recap of what's happened. And when we had the eclipse on December 26th, 25th, 26th, that happened right on Hong Kong's midheaven. And it also was physically, that eclipse was physically visible in China. So when Heather and I got together and were talking about that eclipse, we knew that there was something that was going to go down in China and with China, right? And here it is now. Even the Chinese are talking about it. So that eclipse phase started on the 25th, 26th of December. We're getting ready and close to the end of that eclipse phase cycle, which will be 6 months out from that, which will be July 25th, 26th. In between, we have 2 more eclipses to go. So this is something that people also need to be, prepared for and to wrap your head around, okay? The most immediate concern, obviously, is what's happening in this country. So what I want to do is I want to start from the beginning, and I want to look at the chart for the supposed death of George Floyd, and we're going to get into some of these dynamics that have to do with Gemini and the twin and Floyd. And it's just very strange stuff. Very, very strange stuff. There are so many anomalies with this thing. It's like, it's going to blow your mind. But we can see astrologically what is being activated. And believe me, it is being activated. Okay, so here we go. Let me fire this up. So. All right, I gotta go back to my charts. And we'll look at the week ahead and chart of the moment and all that stuff too. So hang in there for that. We'll definitely check in on the astro weather. Okay. All right. All right, so let's start here. This is theoretically, the numbers are also quite interesting. And I'll get into some of the numbers as well. So on the 25th of May, again, a mere 6 days ago, at roughly 8:08 p.m., this is the time that was given for whatever happened in Minneapolis. And again, what do we see? We see the mirror or the twin, right, of the number 8, as above, so below. Sidereal time is 11/11/12. And then, of course, the year is 2020. So we have the twinning of the year as well. We'll get into more of that. So this is just some of the numeric oddities or the numeric symbolism. Let's go a little bit deeper. So at that point, Scorpio is on the ascendant at 28 degrees, which actually happens to be my rising sign, that degree. And we're coming out of the sign of Scorpio, right? During that hour. And remember that the 27th and the 28th degrees are two of the most volatile degrees of any sign, whether it's on the ascendant, whether it's on the sun, whether it's any of the inner or outer planets, because the sign is about to change. It's about to change and go to 29, which essentially makes it null and void, that there's nothing left at 29, which is a little bit different than the nodes, by the way. A little bit different, and I'll get into that. So here at the 28th degree, it is volatile. It's about as volatile as it gets. So whatever happens as a result of this event, we could be assured of the volatility with the 28th degree. Now, Sagittarius, the South Node had just moved into Sagittarius at 29, and now we're into Gemini, True Node at 29. Pay close attention to this. It's very important. We'll be talking about both quite a bit. The moon in Cancer, right? So we're coming off of that new moon. The moon is in Cancer at 13 degrees, and it is conjunct Sirius. And Sirius is a fixed star that plays a large role in secret societies and Masonic lodges, okay? So Sirius is the blazing star, and it is the twin star, or the binary star, theoretically, of our own sun. And I've talked about this before, that the United States Constitution, they held off for a few days for a number of reasons, but they chose that date specifically because heliacal Sirius was rising before the sun. And we know that the founding fathers were occultists. They were high magicians. They were Freemasons and Rosicrucians. And Ben Franklin, who was in charge of the timing of the events, chose that specific day and that specific time so that heliacal Sirius would rise before the sun. They were giving Sirius credence in some ways over the sun, right? Because in the Freemasonic world, Sirius is the home of their creator, or their creator God, right? Sirius is their version of heaven. So here we have the moon conjuncting Sirius, which is quite interesting. And it's in the 8th house, which is the house of death, right? So one of the things that comes up for me with this aspect, specifically for this event, was there a relationship between what was happening with the so-called death of George Floyd and perhaps one of these groups or organizations that we associate with Sirius? Now, usually when one of these events happens, and I haven't looked this up, there's a lodge nearby. And one of the more, how shall we say, vocal members of the athletic media that has chimed in on every single one of these events is Lebron James. And Lebron James's chest is emblazoned with the insignia from a Prince Hall Mason lodge. So it's pretty clear that LeBron James is a Freemason, as are a lot of athletes, by the way. And he belongs to a very specific lodge, Prince Hall. Now, if that's the case, then we're looking at something quite ritualized, aren't we? Then when we talk about Freemasonry, we can't talk about Freemasonry without talking about Albert Pike and his vision of the world, which is a world in chaos, a world in flames, a world where every man's faith in a Christian God has been eradicated, and that they have to come to some kind of new faith or new representation vis-a-vis their new god, which would be Lucifer. So one could actually make a very good case, and a strong case, that we are beginning to move into the vision of Albert Pike, which again connects us back into the realm of Freemasonry. So this is a very interesting aspect. Now, with the vertex conjunct the moon, right? The vertex is the second ascendant. And this is a very important aspect to the chart. And you're always going to find it between the 9th and the 5th house. So the vertex is an invitation to go deeper. So here the invitation is to go deeper into the 8th house, sort of the mystery of the 8th house, and whatever this event represents. Now, over here is where we begin to see all of the Gemini planets begin to line up. True Node, we have Vesta, we also have Mercury, here's Venus. Venus had yet to go, let me see if she's gone retrograde yet. I don't think Venus was retrograde. Yeah, Venus was retrograde at the time. So we have Venus retrograde, there's the R, and then there's the Sun. That's a lot of Gemini. And at that time, it's all in the 7th house. So the interesting symbolism of all the Gemini in the 7th house is the relationship to Gemini, because that's what the 7th house represents. It represents relationship. So we were talking about a relationship with Gemini and the polarity of Gemini. Here we have the inconjunct with the true node, and it's inconjuncting with Jupiter. And Jupiter's retrograde, and it's in the sign of Capricorn. So we've had this like inundation of Capricorn, and it's beginning to retreat. So the idea here, not only with the inconjunct between the true node, but Jupiter is also inconjunct with Mercury, as is Pluto, by the way. And the inconjunct is a 150-degree angle separated by no more than 3 degrees of the orb. So we have an inconjunct with Mercury and Pluto. We have an inconjunct with Jupiter and Mercury. We have an inconjunct with Mercury and the true node. We have an inconjunct with Mercury and Vesta, and even Pluto and Vesta. So this is a very interesting aspect, very, very interesting aspect. Because when we get into Capricorn, we're talking about hierarchies. We're talking about people that are in positions of government, or people that are in positions of power and influence, corporate power, governmental power, which now seems to be roughly the same, right? So this is a clue right here in that moment. This is a clue. These inconjuncts, in my estimation, represent a path and a trail to the hidden hand behind this event. And that the connection, if one could follow it through their intuition and a little bit of research, we might be able to actually see what is behind what took place during this time. Because Pluto does represent death, correct? Death, transformation. Pluto is power. It is a power sign, right? It is a power sign. And it also represents other people's money and other people's resources related to the sign of Scorpio. It's also the underworld. It's the god of the underworld. So something about this event has its roots in this Plutonian sort of nest, or this Plutonian cauldron, right? Because this is really when the duality is taking shape. This is when we're being kicked into the duality frame set. And the inconjunct is an invitation to understand the relationship between this very powerful conjunction, and these planets, which in many ways represent not just duality or polarity, but boots on the ground. You know, Gemini is local, right? It's local. It's the world around you. So we're looking at the power and the influence that is emanating, and by the way, still emanating even as we speak, as the sun moves closer into inconjunct with Jupiter and Pluto. And then the retrograde, to me, the retrograde has to do with taking power away, right? It is removing the intensity. It is removing, in some ways, the force that is sort of inherent in our society in general. And we can look at this from a policing perspective, right? Because when we get into Gemini, Gemini also represents good and bad, right and wrong, good and evil, right? We look at police officers. And what do we call them? We call them the black and white. They drive black and white cars. There's a reason why they drive black and white cars. Because it represents duality. It represents some level of right and wrong. So there's something behind this event that is not outwardly seen. And it also has to do with money. Because when we get into the second house, what are we talking about? We're talking about assets. We're talking about money. And we're talking about, on some level, whoa, Jasper just took a bit of, you okay, buddy? All right? Jasper took a bit of a fall. You okay? He's still an athlete. He was trying to get his leg over the computer. It's all good. Landing on his feet. We're talking about money, folks. We're talking about powered money. Powered money in organization. Because Capricorn is organization. Now, how are piles of bricks showing up in cities across America? Spontaneously. Just waiting to be hurled. Like, who is putting that together? And you know that there are people who are feeling some outrage about this event. And their outrage is probably their outrage. It is not AstroTurfed outrage. It is their outrage, okay? For whatever reason. But there are others who are there to promote their outrage, to fuel the flames of anger and hatred and violence and destruction. That's what they're there to do. And we know that. We know that. And what's interesting in my realization with this event is the level of infestation that is a part of, it has become a part of our experience. Because this also, to me, has to do with kind of moving the veil away. We often talk about this thing called the deep state, right? The deep state. And it's not a term that I use very much because I think it's misused in many ways. People don't really understand it. But I'll tell you what, we've been given a look behind the curtain with the deep state as these planets begin to go retrograde. And we can look and begin to see just how deep the deep state really is. The deep state lives, works, shops in your town, in your neighborhood, in the city you live in. There are representatives and people who are in positions that are connected to this so-called deep state. We have law enforcement officers. We have first responders. We have people at newspapers. We have people that are admins at hospitals. We have judges, local judges, county judges. We have mayors. We have city council people. We have city managers. These people are all part of the deep state. We have governors. We have representatives, all members of the deep state. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And they have been assiduously working on putting these people into positions of power for the last 20 years. This has been a goal. This has absolutely been a goal. And now we get to see this, right? We get to see just how deep the deep state is. To me, the deep state is almost like the archons in a lot of ways. You know, who's the guy that has the SETI Ranch? I had him on my show one time. You know who he is. He's an interesting guy. I forget his name. SETI Ranch. One time I asked him, like, so who are the archons? And he said that the archons are really a network. It's not like one entity or not like one sort of group, but a number of groups that form together and have their own various roles. So when we talk about this deep state, we're actually talking about a physical manifestation of archonic representation. So things are about to get very revelatory, very, very revelatory. And we're going to see and witness very quickly just how entangled and enmeshed these participants in a very different form of governance are. Because this is what Gemini does, right? Gemini brings out this very interesting, not just polarity, but the ability to put things together, to put pieces together. That's what Gemini does. It can be difficult, right? Because you have to have all the pieces. Sagittarius, which is where we have the big picture, is in its diminished capacity or its diminished state. Remember I talked about how law would also be affected by Sagittarius? Yeah, we're about to see that. So with Gemini, we have to put all the little pieces together. And a lot of us have been working on that for a while. The 29th degree is the anaretic degree. So it's a little bit different than the nodes. There's usually an announcement, though, when the nodes change. We saw just how potent that true node in Cancer had become. When it got down to like 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0 degrees, everybody was in their homes. I mean, everybody. How much more Cancerian could it have gotten? Be safe, be safe, be safe. Wear your mask. That's all very Cancerian, right? We were just in this deep Cancerian well. We needed to get out. And just as we're about to get out, boom, the nodes change. We have 29 Gemini. And if we go back and look at like the keynote event that struck this chord with the true node in Cancer, there were two. There were two keynote events. One was when Satanic Nipple Guy in New York said that it was okay to abort a child right up to birth, okay? Right up to birth, not at birth, maybe a day or two before, yeah, that's okay. And he was gleeful about it, right? Mr. Satanic Nipple Guy was totally into it. Totally into it. Rousing applause. And then the other guy that made his unceremonious debut was Governor Blackface down in Virginia, who really did his very best. He did his very best to have a law passed that you could actually terminate the life of a child after the child was born. These were the two key Cancer events, right? The two key Cancer events that said, guess what? The true node is in Cancer now, and these are some of the issues that we're going to be dealing with. Well, those days are over. And the volatility and the mutability of Gemini is clearly upon us. Clearly upon us. We're going to get into more of this. In fact, what the hell? We get into it right now. Let's talk about the true node in Gemini. So when we look at, and remember now, I've been talking about Prince for a while, okay? I've been talking about Prince for a while. I've talked about him on this show. I've talked about him on my 15 Minutes of Flame show. And I told you guys how Prince and the death of Prince. Now, there are some people who don't think that he's not dead, okay? It doesn't really matter whether he's dead or not, whether he's like sipping Mai Tais and cutting records with David Bowie somewhere in Aruba or someplace like that, right? In the mind of the public, Prince is dead. He's dead. He's dead. He's gone. No more. Kaput. Algol. So that death on a psychic level, and perhaps even on a physical one, took place during a time where it is noted that a noted time for sacrifice. April 21st, day of Molech. It's also the Queen's birthday. Both the Queen and Prince represent what? Royalty. This is where we're going to get into Corona. There's a Corona theme that goes along here, the crown. Now, Prince happens to be what sign? He's a Gemini, born June 7th. We have Prince's birthday coming up. It was 202 days between his death and the election of Donald Trump. What do we have? We have the 2 2s, right? 22. And what do we have now? We have the 2 2s, 22. So we have the twin. We have the twin version of the 2, both in terms of the date between the death and even the year. Right? Okay, so keep that in mind. Yeah, we also know that Prince was the purple one. We have the purple one in chat tonight. And his band is known as the Revolution. And again, I'm going over some ground here because if you're new, you need to kind of wrap your head around this. And when Hillary Clinton and when Bill Clinton showed up the day after Trump got elected, they showed up in purple. That was a clear sign that we were now moved into the phase of a color revolution. And everything that's taken place since then has been part and parcel of a color revolution. These are the revolutions that we became familiar with in the late, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. These revolutions were taking place in the Middle East and in North Africa, places like Yemen and Egypt and Libya. These were the color revolutions. And they were instigated. They were instigated and they were timed. They were engineered, right? And we are now in a color revolution, and we have been since 2017. And it is the purple revolution. Now, what's interesting, of course, is that the city that Prince is from is called the Twin Cities. And it is taking place during the time of Gemini. There are no accidents, okay? There are no accidents. This event could have taken place in Chicago. It could have taken place in Detroit. It could have taken place in Milwaukee. It could have taken place in St. Louis, but it took place in Minneapolis, the Twin Cities. So now we have Prince, the Purple Revolution, Operation Purple Rain, which was designated as a response to what was happening in Minneapolis. Can you see the connections now? Can you see the connections? The connections, I think, are pretty clear. Now, there's more to the rabbit hole. And I'm going to get into the more in a moment here. So let me fire this up. Okay. Here we go. You can see this. So here we have Prince, sort of at the peak of his powers. And he did the soundtrack for the first, well, he and Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman did the soundtrack. And Prince did a song in a fairly well-known video called Bat Dance in the first Batman movie. And what we see here with Prince is typical Prince. We see the duality again, right? The Joker side and the Prince side. So he is actually a living, breathing symbol of his own astrological sign here. And if you watch the video, which I will not play because I don't want to get a strike, the video is filled with murder and mayhem. Lots of gunplay. And even Prince witnessing his own electrocution or about to. Now, what have we connected the coronavirus to? We've connected it to what? The bat. So now we have the two events connecting together. And they are connected, by the way. And by the way, the whole coronavirus thing has not gone away. Right now, as all this stuff, as America burns and the police force basically stand down, they're working on your Corona COVID-19 health pass. That shit hasn't gone away. Hasn't gone away. Isn't it interesting that once that South Node really, really hit Tony Fauci's son, he's just disappeared. He's just disappeared. He's gone. We're not talking about Tony Fauci anymore, and we won't be for a while. Not until the so-called vaccine comes rolling around. And Bill Gates, right? Bill Gates, he may even disappear. You may even see Bill Gates vanish. What if Bill Gates has a vaccine for rioting? You think he's got something for that? I think Bill Gates is probably doing, I think he's doing a river dance right now. Not a bad dance, but a river dance. So yeah, here we go. Here's your connection with the coronavirus and the bat, right? And in one of the videos that I saw with some of the rioting, there was actually a Batman that showed up in one of these videos. Oh, Jasper's back. Jasper's Catman. So there's more to this whole twin piece. It's quite odd, actually. Very odd. Now, George Floyd, who's very hard to find information on, by the way. Derek Chauvin, a little bit easier. I'll talk about him. But George Floyd supposedly was friends, very good friends, with a guy by the name of Steven Jackson. And Steven Jackson played for a number of teams in the NBA, including the Golden State Warriors, San Antonio Spurs. He might have done Carolina team. He was all over the place. He was probably most well known for being in a brutal altercation with fans in Detroit called the Malice in the Palace. And Steven Jackson was suspended for a very long period of time. This is when members of the Indiana Pacers went into the stands at, I think it was Joe Louis Arena or wherever the Detroit Pistons were playing, and started to fight with the fans, right? We had Ron Artest, now Metta World Peace, Jermaine O'Neal, all these characters from the Indiana Pacers went into the stands and sort of. So Steven Jackson's really very well known for the Malice in the Palace. Now, he called George Floyd his twin. I called him twin, right? Twin. George Floyd is 4 years older than Steven Jackson. And George Floyd was from Houston, and Steven Jackson from Port Arthur, Texas, also home with Jimmy Johnson and Janis Joplin. J&J, right? Janis Joplin, Jimmy Johnson. There we go. There's some more twinning for you, right? So Steven Jackson has been very vocal about George Floyd. You know, that he went to Minnesota because he wanted to get his shit together. George Floyd spent 5 years in prison. And look, people can spend time in prison. We had Ben Balderson on the show on Friday. And Ben Balderson spent 8 years in prison, 2 of them in lockdown. And Ben Balderson decided that he was going to turn his life around and go get off the grid and go grow things and have some animals. So it is not impossible for somebody to do prison time or hard time and then, you know, do a 180. Not that Ben's was a hard 180. He sold a half a pound of pot at the wrong time. So that said, George Floyd has a bit of a background, right? Now, here's the weird part. The weird part, and some of you already know this, that George Floyd and Derek Chauvin knew each other. Derek Chauvin, again, here comes the duality. They knew each other. They were security guards at the same club. It was called Los Tropicana or something like that, right? Had a reputation in Minneapolis of a place where you could get anything. And I mean anything, right? If you wanted to go somewhere and get something, that was the place. So they knew each other. They knew each other. Like, how bizarre is that? And why does the press not talk about that. See, there's that Gemini relationship again. There's a Gemini relationship. They knew each other for quite a while. I think Floyd had been in Minneapolis for about 4 or 5 years, right? And Derek Chauvin, again, very high strange stuff. He's the guy that supposedly puts his knee on George Floyd's throat. And as an event, it's very difficult to watch. You know, it's very difficult to watch. And Sean Hannity played this thing over and over again. I mean, Sean Hannity made a whole show out of just that thing, right? Just that thing. He made sure that a lot of his viewers saw that thing. There are some very unusual pieces around that thing. One of the things that's unusual was what happened at the end of that, the strangulation, right? So the EMTs come and they pick him up and put him on this gurney. Now, keep in mind, George Floyd is 6'6", and he probably weighs somewhere around the vicinity of 260 to 265 pounds. And if you watch the video, and many of you have, and many of you will, the two police officers are able to pick him up quite easily. Not a lot of effort, not a lot of stress in picking him up. Now, if it's true that he actually did die, imagine trying to pick up a 6'6", 265, 270 pounds. They called him Big George, right? Big George. And they did it like it was nothing. And then, instead of checking his vitals and doing all the things that you think an EMT would do right there on the spot, they did none of that. They put him in some kind of a police vehicle, and off they went. Very unusual stuff. So we have a lot of anomalies here. A lot of anomalies. And again, we're in the Gemini piece. We're in the Gemini phase. Because Gemini is like a hall of mirrors. Like, what's real? What's not real? Now, let me see if I can find this really quickly. All right. So I'm going to show you this picture. Now, this is the guy they supposedly arrested. This is his mugshot. And this is the guy that was sitting on George Floyd's neck. Are these the same guys? I don't believe they're the same guys. Now, I'm no Ed Sheeran, but they do not look the same to me. They don't look the same to me. Who is this guy? Right. So again, we're in this Gemini bizarro world. And then there's even some other high strange when you look at when he's being essentially strangled, right? And you look at the price of diesel, you can see it clearly at the gas station behind the event. You look at the price of diesel, and it's 99 cents a gallon. Now, is that a part of this kind of alteration of the matrix, right? There he is as a security guard. Yeah, they knew each other. They worked in the same club. Absolutely worked in the same club. So if you were to look back here, you would see 99 cents as the price of diesel. Is that, I mean, diesel is not 99 cents. So when did this really happen? I mean, when did this happen? Now, the other thing that has some very bizarre connections here with the whole event has to do with the fact that he was married to Miss Minnesota, Kelly Chauvin. Now, apparently, her brother, what's his name? Thantuo, the other officer who was part of that group, is her brother. So again, we have this Gemini theme showing up. Now, the other thing that's quite bizarre, and I've gone and looked on his, I've done a search on him. And what's very strange is that his occupation is listed as a realtor. And so is Kelly Chauvin. She's also listed as a realtor. In fact, she has 3 or 4 real estate titles. Nowhere does it say on his people search that he works for the Minneapolis Police Department. And if you looked at the video of the neighbors, they didn't know he was a cop. They thought he was a realtor. So what is really going on here? These people are real estate agents. And who is this guy? Because this guy is not this guy. I'm sorry, he's not this guy. Right? He's not this guy. And the whole thing with the badge here is very weird. It's very, very weird. It's tilted at an angle. I mean, this is just a complete psychological agitprop. He's like gloating. I mean, he reminds me of a De Niro-esque character who's just gloating into the camera and says, look at this. I'm choking the shit out of this guy and I'm choking him to death. This is the greatest effect, right, that this picture is promoting. And it's promoting it. Don't get me wrong. It is promoting it. And there's a very strange kind of weird time anomaly between when they first take him out. When they first take him out of the store where he's supposedly trying to cash a counterfeit bill. And then they begin this. There's a very weird time anomaly. There's so many things about this event that really need a lot more questions. But what happens with the media is the media doesn't even question anything. And then I even ran across some bizarre shit with, here, let me see if I can find it. Probably can. Okay, I'll show you. So remember, we really went down the Kobe Bryant rabbit hole. And we looked at all the Corona references with Kobe Bryant. And there were plenty of Corona references. And one of the Corona references even had to do with one of the young girls on the plane whose mother and the girl went to a school in Corona del Mar, which is, of course, King of the Sea. And then we get into Lebron James and the King, and there's just so many Corona references. And it really, the Kobe Bryant event kicks off coronavirus. So here we have Kobe Bryant at a practice. And I believe this was after the Eric Garner situation in New York. And he and the rest of his Laker crew wore t-shirts that said, "I can't breathe." Now, this is supposedly what George Floyd was also saying during the event. And then here we have this very bizarre photo right here of George Floyd standing next to a Corona bottle, Corona Lights, most likely in this Tropicana nightclub, which, by the way, closed because the coronavirus shut it down. So supposedly the guy was without a job. And they were co-workers. There it is. Derek Chauvin and George. So do you see all these strange Gemini anomalies that are coming up? All the twin stuff. Steven Jackson, another NBA player, claiming that George Floyd is his twin, taking place in the Twin Cities. Prince the Gemini, the revolution starting in the Twin Cities. And then we have this bizarre connection between the Corona, the kickoff of the Corona event, and now we have the kickoff of the Purge event. This is just, I mean, the synchromysticism, the astrological parallels in this thing are thick. And this has a lot to do with Gemini, by the way. Welcome to Gemini. Welcome to the Hall of Mirrors that we're going to be presented with. And it's going to be very difficult, too, also, during this phase, to understand who is who or what is what. One of the things that's occurred during the first phase of what happened with the coronavirus is that people began to lose trust in their government. And it was all very much a part of the plan. But this is why Anthony Fauci would say one thing and then he'd say another thing. That was not by happenstance, right? Because Fauci rolled out all this credibility and all this power that had been given to him. And then as this unfolded, he was always contradicting himself. There was always some other new position, whether it was with the flattening of the curve or the wearing of the mask or the lockdown or wherever that thing is, right? So what happened was we began to lose trust in our politicians. So the trust eroded. Now we've entered into a new level of distrust and mistrust, right? Now you walk around, if you're in a city, you don't know who you're going to run into, right? We have never lived in an environment, in my opinion, where we have been or perhaps felt less safe. Okay, this is a fact. So one of the things that people are going to have to manage is they have to manage their fear. This is very important. Very, very important. And we're all going to have to work through the management of our fear, because we're going to be presented with situations that we've never ever seen before. Really horrific situations. Not just horrific, but situations that fracture and shatter not just families, but cities and towns and communities. Because this is what Gemini does, right? That's what Gemini does. It polarizes, it separates. And something that starts off as perhaps benign, as somebody coming onto a Facebook page or a group community page and says, hey, who would like to set up a memorial service or some sort of vigil for George Floyd, in the area, right? Who is that person? Where do they come from? What's their intention? See, this is what I'm talking about now. This is where we are. We have to be really vigilant. I hate to say this. We have to be really, really vigilant. And it's only because the level of mistrust in this hall of mirrors that we're in right now makes it very, very difficult to just co-sign on anything. We're now going to have to navigate this Gemini world for the next 2 years. But the thing that's interesting about the Gemini world, obviously, is that there's a bit of a trickster element, which, by the way, we saw with Prince in his evocation of the Joker in Bat Dance. And sometimes people who set out to do something have that thing recoil and come back to them. And I've seen videos of that. I watched a video of a guy try to set something on fire. It's a place in Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. It's Kentucky. A famous place in Kentucky. And he went to set it on fire. He himself caught on fire, right? I watched, these guys try to take a dumpster and crash some barricades. And one of their protesters when it got caught in between the dumpster and the barricade. He got slammed. Okay, so we'll see some of this stuff. It'll happen because we are in the time of the trickster. This is Hermes' time. Okay? This is Loki's time. And in some ways, you have to be able to think along those lines as well. You have to be able to move between worlds, perhaps even disguise yourself at times. That might not be out of the question. Might not be out of the question. And there's a lot of different ways that we could probably discuss how to do that. Cloaking, disguising, whatever you need. It's part of the time. It's definitely part of the time. The other thing that we've seen, and keep your eye on this now, because there are definitely the potential for agents provocateurs, also very Gemini-like, looking one way and showing up another way. We're watching the number of cars start to hit protesters, right? Cars with Trump flags on them. Do we believe that? And Gemini rules travel. And we're starting to see these cars come into play, and battering rams. Maybe some of it's real and true, maybe some of it isn't. We don't know. We don't know. And it's going to be difficult to know with the true node in Gemini. I also want to get back into the chart, but I wanted to take you down the twin rabbit hole because it's pretty deep. It's pretty deep. And remember, Prince and the energy related to that event, right, is really unfolding and uncoiling right before our very eyes. Twin cities, Minneapolis, George Floyd, Stephen Jackson's twin. The strange relationship between him and Derek Chauvin working at the same club. Derek Chauvin's brother, Thal too, also being a part of the team there, the supposed team, whatever that was, right? Then even the guy that looks like Chauvin, is he really Chauvin? What is going on here? We're witnessing something that is not really rooted in the storyline or the narrative that we're being fed, which is obvious, right? It's obvious. And they're piggybacking on this event, and they're going to use this event as fuel to try to burn this country down, and perhaps even in other parts of the world as well. We're watching the South Africa, how do I say this? We're watching what happened in South Africa and in Rhodesia begin to happen in this country now. And some people say, great, wonderful, fine, about time. Yeah, you guys deserve it and all that stuff, right? Well, just be clear. Just be clear, right? If this does indeed continue to unfold in that pattern and in that way, and somehow, God help us, there is a sea change in who's running this country. The people that are instigating these riots and the people that are following along, hoping that they get what they want, well, you just wait to who your new rulers will be. And I guarantee you, you will be the first to go. You will be the absolute first to go. Because that's what Yuri Bezmenov talks about, okay? That's what he talks about. And the revolution that you participated in will look nothing like the revolution you thought it was going to be. But people don't want to hear that. And besides, this thing is just getting started now. And it's not going to abate. It's not going to abate. We're going to have to go through this now. And, Steve and Chris and I did a show about the United States and how the United States maps of the United States look very fragmented, all of them, many of them. And we've already seen the fragmentation process take place, and really along blue and red state lines. It's really happening. It's really happening. And I think we're going to be dealing, because also the United States is going to have its Pluto return. And we're going to be dealing with a very, very different country on the other side of this Pluto return. Very different country. In the meantime, we all have lives we have to live. We have vocations that we have to follow. We have jobs we have to go to. We have to navigate this time. We have to navigate it with wisdom and courage and a sense of truth and love, right? That's what it's about. You know, we can't stop our lives. It's just not going to happen. Our lives may, you know, have to deal with some challenges here, but we can't stop our lives. But you're going to have to be aware, very aware. I'm going to tell you something right now, okay? If you have not finished your preps, you need to finish your preps. You need to finish your preps probably in the next 48 hours. Trust me on this. You need to finish whatever preps, if it's like cat food, litter, whatever you need. You got about 48 hours. That's my sense here to take care of that business. After that, I think we're in a very different territory, okay? Because we have yet to see the response to what we've witnessed. And that response may be coming in the form. Now, Trump has said that the states are going to be responsible for their own martial law. Right? Nobody's really heard from him. Been in a bunker. And you can bet your ass that they're trying to figure out what to do. I guarantee you. Now, we're going to find out a lot about Trump in the next few days, the next few weeks. We're going to find out a lot about who he is and how he plans on dealing with this new threat, not only to his presidency, but to the entire country. Okay? We're going to find out a lot about who he is. And for anybody that's been, you know, banging the Q drum, you're gonna see, you know, how real a lot of this information that you've been decoding actually is. These are very, very important times. Very important times. And one of the things that I've again stressed is that, you know, you got to get right with yourself. You got to get right with God. And that's really important. That's very important. Very, very important. You want to be on the right side of that ledger sheet because we're entering into a phase. And I talked about this back in last year. I've been talking about this for a while now. And as we moved into the eclipse, you know, and I said this on Regina's show and said it here, that we're moving into a time, right, where it's going to stop. Like the thing that we're involved with is going to stop and it's going to be over and there will be no time, right? Be no time. It'll be a different kind of time. Doesn't mean you can't evolve spiritually. You can still do that, right? You can still do that, but it'll be different. It won't be the way that we've been doing it now or have been. Nothing will be from this point forward. I guarantee you that. All right, let me go back into this chart, which is the chart of the death of George Floyd. Oh, I put him up. I put Prince's chart in here too, you know, just to see if there was any interesting connections. This is not Prince's death chart. This is Prince's natal chart. Let's take a look at this together. This is the synastry between the two. So what's interesting is that Prince has his Saturn in the sign of Sagittarius, right? Prince's Saturn is in Sagittarius. So Prince is on the outside. So here's his Saturn, right? And here's the south node, right here. Boom, right? This is the south node that we're talking about in Sagittarius. So Prince is at his Saturn is actually in a unique way kind of playing an interesting role here, because Saturn represents time. And in Sagittarius is in some ways it's related to justice, right? Some ways, law and justice, theoretically. And here we have really where the mix is, right? Prince's Venus and Taurus conjunct Uranus, Uranus being the planet that rules Aquarius and revolution, right? And we've already stressed that this is the purple revolution. So we see Prince's Venus here in conjunction with Uranus. So there's a relationship to this Uranian revolutionary energy. And then here's Prince's south node, conjunct Venus right here, and also in conjunction with Uranus. So we see Saturn and Uranus playing a role in these various versions of the south node. And when we have Saturn and Uranus sort of doing things together in the chart, then what do we have? We have Chiron, because Chiron is the arbiter. Right? Chiron is the mediator between Saturn and Uranus. And right here, we have Chiron in Aquarius, essentially at the midpoint between Uranus and Saturn. Right? And what do we have with you want to make this trip again? Okay, you get to go. Go try it. You could do it. You can sit on the other side. Very well done. Very well done. Graceful, Jasper. Graceful. Well done. And Prince has your Chiron in Aquarius, right? And what is Aquarius? Again, it's revolutionary. So we have Chiron, literally the bridge between Saturn and Uranus in these two charts. And here we talk about the wound, right? The wound of genius, the wound of being eclectic, the wound of being strange, the wound of being unique. Prince carried that around quite a bit, in my estimation. And this is also, very much connected to social media, right? And in fact, remember when he changed his name to a symbol? It's very Aquarian, very Chiron. He did that to get out of that contract, theoretically, with Warner Brothers. Now, what else do we have here? We have, this is interesting, because we have Prince's sun right there, conjunct Venus with this event, right? Prince also had Vesta in Gemini. And we see Vesta also in the sign of Gemini as well. So had Prince been alive, he would have gone through his Vesta return. And then we also see the transiting sun conjunct Prince's Mercury right here, right? 7th house of the event. So we see that Prince's energy has a relationship to the event itself. Now, Neptune was a planet that I've been wanting to talk about as part of this mix, because Neptune is in square with Mercury, right? Whenever you have a Neptune square with Mercury, you cannot trust the things that you hear or see. Like the Neptune Mercury square, and I've said this before, is it is the square that is indicative of lying, right? Now, you may have a Mercury Neptune square in your chart, and you may not be a liar, but that does not make you immune to other people who tell lies. In fact, it makes you more of a mark in some ways with a Mercury Neptune square. And then there are people with Mercury Neptune squares, and for a fact that they do lie. They lie. That's part of the Mercury Neptune square, and we are seeing it right here in this chart, right? It's right there, bada bing. Throw Venus in there too. Square Venus, Neptune square Venus. Can we trust the relationships? Can we trust the relationships between whoever's presenting this information? And we live in a media-driven country, which is really a very Gemini related enterprise. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the United States' Venus is in the sign of Gemini. So again, the United States' Venus is getting caught up in this as well. These are pretty extreme squares with Neptune. So I would say, based on the squares with Neptune, that a lot of what we've seen cannot be believed. It cannot be believed. That there's a deception, a sleight of hand. Because Gemini is also very much akin to magicians, right? Do you see the movie The Prestige with David Bowie playing Tesla and Hugh Jackman, who plays a magician who is dueling with this other magician, Christian Bale? You guys have seen the movie, right? What's the secret of that movie? The secret of that movie is that Christian Bale has a twin, and he's able to pull that incredible magic stunt off, right? So That is a an exposition of Gemini as it relates to magic, specifically with that movie. Specifically with that movie. There's a lot more going on with this chart as well. A lot. So, but I feel like the big factors here are Princess Saturn, right here, right, on the South Node, the conjunction with Princess Sun and Venus and Mercury in the 7th house of the so-called event. We know the time of the event, 8:08, right here, boom, right there. Also, we have Princess Pallas conjunct the vertex of the moon, and Pallas represents pattern recognition, right? So there's clues here. This is a clue to go into the vertex. And I think Cancer, as well as Gemini, would provide us with some very interesting clues. Anybody related to the sign of Cancer with this event? No, I haven't looked that deeply. Or Cancer-related roles, right? Because pattern recognition shows up here. And then, of course, the South Node. Now, what's also interesting, this is fascinating, right, is that transiting Black Moon Lilith was conjunct. So Prince's Black Moon Lilith was conjunct Black Moon Lilith. We know that Lilith changes signs, right, into Aries. So we're dealing with violence with Aries and the shadow and the projection of violence onto the world, which is what Black Moon Lilith does, right? It is a deeper psychological projection. For women, it is the projection of their masculine onto the world, right? For men, it is the search for their feminine into the world. That's how Black Moon Lilith operates. And then, of course, we have Chiron conjunct Eris. And this, Eris is always in Aries. Right? Here we have Eris, Princess chart, conjunct Chiron, which is transiting through Aries as well. And oh, by the way, 4th house, right? And where did Prince call home? Minneapolis. This is the home. This is the home of the event. And there's Princess Mars. Right there. Boom. 0 Aries. Right in the center of the IC for the 4th house in Minneapolis' chart. What do we have? We have violence. Violence. Intensity. Lots and lots of intensity. Wow. All right. Let me check in with you guys, see where you're at. Do a little Chatlandia pulse check. We got 251 people watching. I've seen The Prestige a few times. It's a great movie. It is a great movie. Phoebe Kane says, curfew imposed in nearest towns. Walmart and grocery stores shutting down. Very limited hours. Robert's correct on prep. Yep. Target closed with no reopening date. This is the new lockdown. Okay. Twin Cities. That's right. Minneapolis and St. Paul. Got that right. It's the Twin Cities. Yep. Very surreal. The Prestige is excellent. Great movie. Material preparation is only a small part. Yeah, well, it's a big part. If you don't have your material preparation, you're fucked. Small but big. I have a Mercury Neptune square, and I've been told I'm too honest. That's right. People with Mercury Neptune squares generally get taken in. Right? Generally get taken in. You have to learn about discernment with a Mercury Neptune square. Esoteric ruler of Venus is Gemini. Yes. Bring up Trump's charts. Worried for him. Yeah, Trump's got some eclipse energy coming his way. Definitely has some eclipse energy coming his way. Timothy Hartless says, yep, it's an inside job. Didn't comment pass right by Algol, as we see it about a week ago. Nango, I'm going to have to check that out. I am going to have to check that out. And I will do. Trucker strike, of course. Let's see what else we have here. Nancy Pelosi having floats as we speak. Independent truckers parking their trucks. More dollars to be made. Yep. Some good communication in Chatlandia. You guys are awesome. Really, really awesome. All right, what else do we have here? 40 hours to get prep and what? I couldn't hear him. Yeah. This is all mask for GSM, food shortage, and the biggest shift in modern history. Yeah, I mean, they're really going to put the pressure on, right? So the idea here is that they really want to do this massive paradigm shift. You know, they really want to just end the last world, right? And roll this new world out. And they're going to have some glitches. They're definitely going to have some glitches. Let's pop up the chart of the moment, and let's see where we are and what we can look at for the week ahead. And then I'm going to pop up Trump's chart. We'll take a quick look at that, and we'll probably, you know, I'm sorry, I was going to do some of these wedding charts, but you know, something happened, something more pressing came up, and I still have those charts. I've set them aside, and maybe next week, if you know, things have cooled a bit, then you know, we'll get into that. But I felt like I wanted to spend a lot of time, you know, working with this material tonight. So let's do the chart of the moment, and we'll get into that. You know, I did, hold on, let me change this really quickly. I'm a stickler for getting this shit right. Just give me 1 second. Let's just do this. Easy for you to type this. All right, here we go. Chart of the moment coming right up. I just had to change the location. Here we go. All right. Bada bing. All right, here we go. So 2 Capricorn, that's where we are right now. I just used Austin. It's easier for me to type. We have a grand trine happening, right? Saturn, Moon, and even Sun, Venus getting pulled in. It's a wide trine. It's actually probably what? It's actually more Jupiter, you know. No, it's Saturn. Let me just see here. It's very wide. Make sure. Yeah, Saturn trine, Sun and Moon. So this is really, you know, for right here now. The Moon is moving pretty quickly. Moon and Libra, you know, we're attempting to find some balance, right? Attempting to find some balance in Moon and Libra. I feel like the transit through Scorpio, as always, will be intense. And we're 2 days out from that because we're going to go through that Moon opposition to Uranus, which will be, I think kind of intense, kind of heavy, actually. Very chaotic. Again, we're dealing with these kind of Uranian revolutionary energies. Remember now, Taurus is all related to first chakra stuff, right? Your housing, your food, all security items. You know, and we're gonna have this moon opposition Uranus. So I feel like 2 days from now, things are gonna get very explosive when it comes to these kinds of items, these kinds of pieces are very, very important pieces of our life. Okay? So that's why you want to make some preparations now. Because I think 48 hours, things are going to get even more erratic. Okay. Now, part of the Grand Trine also has to do with the sun. Saturn's retrograding, so we're just catching the end of this. Tomorrow, we're going to get a little bit of that moon-sun trine going on, which is not bad. Waking up and trying to find some more balance. You know, one of the things that that Libra is pretty good at is being diplomatic. Okay, so do your best to be diplomatic and be able to navigate your world. Also instinctually, right? Because the moon is instincts. Listen to your instincts and try to bring those in balance with your head. The instincts in your head coming together in balance in Libra. We do have a square right now, and it is right now. By the time we wake up tomorrow, the moon will be moving on a little bit, you know, slightly separating from that square. And this is not, you know, anytime you get into a moon Mercury square, if you have a moon Mercury square in your chart, you know, what you're trying to do is you're really trying to figure out how you can really live instinctually and bring your emotions together with your head and how you think. And that's your challenge with the moon Mercury square. Also, communication with the mother can be very challenging with the moon Mercury square. Also, finding the right place to live can be difficult with the moon Mercury square. But the idea here with the moon Mercury square is you resolve that stuff inside yourself, right? So that ultimately, once it's resolved, you know, you find the place to live, or you're able to communicate with your mother in some meaningful fashion. And that your head and how you think and your instincts and your intuition and your emotions are not disconnected. You know, you work through the conflict of them with the moon Mercury square. And we have a little bit of that going on tonight. And it's in cardinals, so it's being activated. The other squares, of course, we've talked about already. You know, we have Mars. And now when Mars moves up on Neptune, that's going to be very tricky, right? That we've already talked about, like, when we talked last week, Mars and Pisces, what were we covering? We're talking about victimization, right? The victim as a hero. You know, anger, victimization, some retribution. We talked about that last week with Mars and Pisces. We also talked about some examples at sea with Venezuela and Iran. And I think we're going to see more of that as Mars gets closer to the conjunction with Neptune. And one of the things I've witnessed, I watched this video, maybe some of you have seen it. I watched this video where I think it was somewhere in New York. Might have been upstate New York, or maybe it might have been Minneapolis. But there was definitely martial law. There was a curfew going on. And there were these guys who were walking down the street in black uniforms, and they were telling people to stay inside their homes, okay? And there were these nitwits out on their porch, and they were told to go back inside. And they didn't. So what did the cops do? They shot assault round and hit one of them in the crotch. And they went running back into their house. And then the comments on Twitter were blowing my mind. It's like, that's private property. They have a right to be out in front of their house. Well, first of all, there really is no such thing as private property. Let's just get that right out front, okay? There's no such thing as private property. Like, if you have a mortgage on your home, you don't own your home. Whoever holds the paper owns your home, right? So it validates this notion of private property from the jump. If you rent, it's not your home. Somebody else owns your home. And even if you pay your home off, you still have to pay property taxes on it. What happens if you stop paying property taxes on it? The state will take your home away. So this whole notion of private property, the only way you get private property is if you set up an allodial trust and you basically buy your house with gold, right? Because you're not using Federal Reserve notes. And then you own the land and you own the building, right? That's the only way you really have truly private property. Now, for the sake of argument, somebody crosses into your home, you can defend yourself. I mean, that is, you know, part and parcel. But let's just disabuse ourselves of this notion of private property or property in general, right? It is semi-private. So these people are saying, oh yeah, private property, private property, private property. You just go in, they can be out there. No, you can't be. If the city calls a curfew and a martial law, and I hate to say this, right? I hate to say this, but you better be in your fucking house. You better not be outside. And this is where this is headed, by the way. This is where this is headed. If you're watching footage of Philadelphia, Philadelphia is burning right now. They're rioting, they're burning. And I know friends, I've dear friends in Philadelphia, and their hearts are being broken. Right? They're being broken. But if you're on your porch and they're telling you to get inside, you're a freaking idiot if you don't get inside. I just hate to say it. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because all of a sudden now, those people, and they were women, young women, on the porch were considered victims. They were victims. No, they weren't victims. They were not victims. In a situation like that, I don't care who the fuck you are. You got 20 guys walking down your street and they're armed and they're telling you to get in your house. Like, you know what? You better get in your damn house. You know, unless you've got, you know, a 50 caliber machine gun and about 1,000 rounds of ammo, you might be able to make a different choice. And you better be prepared for the consequences. That's Mars and Pisces. That's Mars and Pisces. Labeling these protests is Mars and Pisces. It is. They're not protests. They're absolute riots and looting. This is the purge. We're watching the purge. We're watching purge programming before our very eyes. Now you see why the movies were created, right? Those movies are living in the subconscious of everybody that's watched them. Very Piscean, by the way. So here we go. Mars squaring the sun. Mars is going to come up and square Venus, right? So, well, Venus is a little bit, well, it's retrograding, so of course it's going to square Mars. So the conflict and the stress are not going to abate. Let's look at, just for the sake of accuracy, when we're going to have that Mars-Neptune conjunction. Because that's really what we want to look at here. Mars-Neptune conjunction. It's a biggie. I would not be surprised, by the way, if we have another event stage. See, now what's happened, based on this event, anything that happens to somebody who is in some form of violation or trespass now becomes a really big issue. Really big issue. Then we have George Floyd 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And this thing is out of control. It's almost there now. Okay, so we're looking at the Mars-Neptune conjunction. Okay. So Neptune's at 20 and Mars is at going to be at 20 on June the 13th. That's a Saturday. You know, seems like the weekends are prime time for riots and looting and burning in America. So that's a day you really, really want to just circle, right? We're also dealing with the moon in the final phases of Pisces. On Sunday, it moves into Aries. Venus is still retrograde. It goes direct, but Mercury goes retrograde on the 18th. Okay. We're dealing with an eclipse, eclipse energy on the 5th, June 5th. That's the first lunar eclipse. That's the first eclipse of what promises to be a very intense eclipse season. And that's going to be in Sagittarius, which, by the way, is Donald Trump's own eclipsed moon, because Trump was born on the eclipsed moon in Sagittarius, which means we're coming up on Trump's birthday, right? His solar return. Mars moves into Aries on the 29th of June. And that's a critical phase, very critical phase. It begins in opposition to the moon in Libra, and we begin the long march with Mars in Aries for the next 6 months. Mercury finally comes out of retrograde on the 12th of July. In the meantime, we will go through another eclipse, and that will be on the 5th. Right? That'll be on the 5th of July. Let me just see here. Yep. 5th of July, another eclipse. And let's see, what else do we have? Yeah, that's the last eclipse that deals with, we have another one at 0. Hold on, my bad. The one at 0 Cancer. That's on the 21st. That is a solar eclipse on the 21st. So here we go. The eclipses are going to start to hit. The 0 Cancer, right? 0 Cancer. And then the big eclipse is on the 5th, lunar eclipse. And that's on the US sun. So we're in it now. We're in it now, okay? So the best thing you can do, right, is you got to stay cool, stay logical, work with, this kind of, because what they want to do, right, there wasn't enough fear with the coronavirus. Now they want to ramp up this fear in a big way, right? Now, passing through this gate is going to be very important, right? Because there's a huge lesson for us to learn about fear and fearlessness. That should be number one, right? That should be your mindset, right? And if you have to experience your worst or greatest fear in your head, experience it. Let it out. Get through it in your mind. Just get through it in your mind. Let it out. Very important. You can ask for strength and protection as you go through that process so that you're not abandoned in the wilderness of your own imagination, your own anxiety. Okay? So if you have to go through the worst case scenarios, and you have to go through them. Breathe, let it out, and just ask to be shown, right? And let it go. Play the hologram right out. Get through it. And don't forget to breathe. This is very important. Very, very important. And ground. We have to ground. And be aware. Be aware. All your senses should be switched on all the time now. Right? All the time. And remember with Gemini, it's important also to be mutable, to shift, to do things differently. This is very important. Gemini also changes roles. Can change identities, change names. We're going to see a lot of that. You may even have your own version of that, right? Maybe you're somebody, who for a long time has been very vocal about certain things. Maybe you want to dial that back. Maybe you want to recede in the background a little bit. I'm not sure if I can do that, by the way. I think I'm already too far out here. But if that's what you want to do or need to do, you can do that now, and it's okay. Right? It's really okay. You know, in a time where things are tumultuous, you know, you don't need to be somebody who is, you know, kind of what's what I'm looking for, you know, false hero consciousness, right? You know, there are times where you have to use real discretion and real discernment about what you share and who you share it with. Also, pay attention, pay a lot of attention to what's going on where you live. That's really important. And talk to the people that matter. If you know who they are, talk to them. Make sure that they know what's going on, right? That you can have lines of communication, which is important. Brings up another thing. Figure out, if you can, different ways of being able to stay in touch with people. Your cell phones, our cell phones may not work at some point. So whether that's having a landline or however you're going to communicate, you know, you may want to just think about that and give that some thought. Because Venus is going retrograde in Gemini, and Gemini has to do with communication. So keep that in mind as well. Stay cool. Stay really, really cool. Right? We got through the Corona phase, and we're going to get through this phase. All right? But this is a really, really big phase running. It's very significant. Very, very significant. This is what you came here for, right? You came here literally for this time, so that we could face everything and get through this. And if we're really smart, right, we can amplify and take our game to another level. That's the most important thing. Most important thing. If you have to pull back and be a little more discreet in a time where there's a lot of heavy tension and conflicting and dual energy here, there's no harm, no foul in that. Okay, no harm, no foul. It's okay. It's all good. All good. All right. I'm going to be out here. I'm transition out of here. But I will be back tomorrow. And if you like this stream, you can subscribe here. There will be a link where you can subscribe to the stream. And there are different levels you can subscribe at. And tomorrow, I'll be back on the 15 Minutes of Flame side. I hope. I haven't used it since the last time YouTube sort of made it a bit more difficult for me to get in. But we'll do 15 Minutes of Flame, and we'll go over like what's happened overnight and try to get the lay of the land for the week ahead. Thank you. Bless you. I love you all. You're the best, Chatlandia. You're awesome. You know, you guys are all, you know, rebels and really compassionate people and really smart people. And you're a very important part of my experience. I can't even begin to tell you how important my connection is with you. In fact, I'm getting choked up. And everybody else who watches the videos, we're in it together now, okay? So let's hang together, and we'll get through the time, all right? Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll see you guys tomorrow on 15 Minutes of Flame.